Welcome to Don't Chuck It Up, the podcast where we help students and families navigate the wild journey of the college search. And we help students apply to colleges without breaking a sweat. I'm your host, Chuck, and today we are talking about the ACT and the SAT. And because I am not a subject matter expert on the ACT or the SAT, I thought I'd bring someone along to help me with this conversation. So please welcome Eric to the Don't Chuck It Up podcast. Welcome, Eric.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Happy to be here.
Excited to chat with you. I think you and I are going to have a great conversation today, but why don't we first start off and introduce yourself?
Yeah, I'm Eric Rath. I'm the founder of Rath Tutoring. We've been in business about 11 years, and I've been in tutoring over 20. And so I've seen a lot of changes over the years with these different tests and kind of their claims and, differences on content and strategies. And so, this is going to be a great conversation. I have a lot of experience and would just love to share that also I've experienced this as a parent as well. So it's one thing that I have this much experience, but my daughter is heading into her junior year of college. And so I've seen it from really all sides, the test prep side, the parent side, the student side, you name it.
Well, and that's why I thought you'd be a great person to have on the show, because not only it's like the old commercials, like, not only am I the founder, but I'm also a client. Like, okay, we're doing this currently with your own daughter to try and navigate the process and what's happening. I'm glad I'm able to talk today. I lost my voice a few days ago, so if people are wondering if I sound a little bit different, is because I'm not quite all the way back, but we're going to make it work and have a good conversation. So let's first start off with, it is 2026, and a lot of our listeners were applying to colleges back in the 80s and 90s and 2000s. What is the role of test optional and ACT, SAT in today's admissions world?
I think the short answer is that it's fluid right now. During COVID, a lot of schools, actually the vast majority of schools, went test optional. A number of them, most prominently, it's the University of California system, went totally test free. So even if you had it, they wouldn't even consider it. And in the last couple of years, there's been a big push towards reinstating the tests. There's a number of different factors as to why, partially even just the tests themselves wanting to be that much more popular and used that much more. But in short, you really have to check in on which schools your students applying to, what their policies are. They are changing even year by year, where they shift from even test free or test optional to then test recommended and then test required and back and forth. So that's why I say it's very fluid right now. And I think that's the key point here, is determining whether it's worth it to spend the time, because even for any student, really, you're going to still be spending a certain amount of time on homework and practice tests, either with a tutor or self-study. So you'd probably have to factor in, is this worth a minimum of, I kind of compare it to learning a language. Is this worth a minimum of maybe 100 hours or 200 hours, all in pure effort, not necessarily with a class or with a tutor, but, between all the different homework and practice tests as well.
Yeah, and what we saw with the numbers from the NACAC, the National Association for College Admissions Counseling, this last year, is that there was a 1% increase in colleges and universities that are on the Common App that now want ACT and SAT scores. So yes, there are more colleges that want them or require them, but there still is a substantial amount of institutions that are test-free or test optional. So for students and parents that are freaked out about, I'm not, a great test taker, or it doesn't showcase my best abilities, there still are lots of places that you can apply to that don't require the ACT or SAT for both admission and for scholarship opportunities. But if you're looking at the very hyper-competitive type institutions, a lot of those are the ones that are either back to test required or really do want to see them. Also, we're seeing large state systems going back to requiring the tests, probably because they have a contract with the testing agency, and there's probably some money going on in there. We can be honest about that there's some pockets being lined. So that's probably why some test agents or some states are going back to mandated testing.
Yeah, and even with the University of California, I've been involved in that conversation kind of from the start as far as reinstating them. And personally, I would like to see them not get reinstated because I have my own criticisms of like outsourcing our assessment to private third parties rather than having a university of system like the UC system develop their own. But those are much bigger political and like kind of diplomatic, policies at play. And so it's a factor, but it's also not a determining factor. And actually, I do want to go back to real quick your comment on students saying that they're not a good test taker, because that's probably the number one concern that I hear from either parents or students. And my response to that is, well, of course you're not a good test taker. It's never taught. There is no curriculum on
Right.
how to be a test taker, and especially in a way that is testing things that can be tricky at times. The wording is a little off. It can lead you astray, and it's timed, and you're by yourself. It's very rare in life that anyone, you know, other than maybe like some secret agent that's, undercover out there or something, is completely alone and can't rely on any sort of help, or guidance or mentorship in the moment. And this test is one of those. So there's absolutely methods and approaches that you can implement to be a better test taker, but it is like learning a new language. You do need to develop a certain fluency with not just the material, but how to take it.
Absolutely. And also, it's like, as you mentioned, the new skill. If I wanted to become an all-star basketball player, I'm going to have to get out there and practice a whole lot in order to achieve any type of competency within basketball, because let's be real, I'm only 5'8.5", so that's not going to really happen.
Yeah.
Uh, but it's the same with the test. Students will take it once and they'll get, an average or less than average score, and they go, "Oh, I'm horrible at this." I'm going, "You took it once and you didn't even
Right.
do any practice." It would be like me trying to go out and play in an NBA game. I'm
Hmm.
going to fail miserably because it's just not going to happen. So, as students and parents are navigating this process, again, we're dealing with a lot of parents that grew up back when, if you wanted to apply to a Midwest college, you took the ACT. If you wanted to apply to a coastal school, you took the SAT. What's that conversation like now? How should students and parents think about the ACT versus the SAT?
Yeah, it's completely understandable. That is what it was like years ago. But really, with more students applying to more schools, like each student applies to a greater volume and applying cross regionally. Students usually used to stay fairly close to home,
Hmm.
at least within reason. And with students applying all over the country, uh, the universities have decades of experience taking in both tests. So they have concordance tables, they can compare them. There is no gain to taking one over the other, but having one at least is, if they require it, is really the need. So I think also many families get tripped up on one, or maybe have some tutoring or take some tests with one and think it's going to be some savior or some magic bullet if they switch. It's not the case. Most of the content is the same these days. There's some slight structural differences. There's some kind of wording or like kind of the nuances that are different. But by and large, you're not going to have some like magic switch that you can flip just by switching tests. So our recommendation usually, since it doesn't matter which one you send to the colleges, you can send both, they're equally good, um, is take a practice test in each and see which one the student likes more. And personally, I like the ACT more. I think it's more plain language. I think it's more straightforward. There's, to me, fewer calculation steps, especially on things like polynomials or some of the higher level math, that it's, to me, it's easier to avoid on the ACT those kind of ticky-tack errors that you can understand everything but mess one thing up. But some people really like the algebraic feel of our kind of focus of the SAT, or even the SAT has shorter reading passages, right? So they like those kind of smaller clips of passages rather than maybe 10 questions or 9 questions on one passage or one longer passage. So getting a feel for which one the student likes more is even good from a motivating standpoint, because just to have it from a teenager's mind, they get to sit there and say, well, at least I don't have to worry about that crummy other test, is a jumping off point, and they feel like they have some ownership over it as well. Uh, so I wouldn't worry about which, but pick one and stick with it, is what I would say.
I I agree with everything that you said. I would add that look to what is available at your high school. So if your high school is giving the ACT for free, or they may start with SAT or the PSAT in younger years, it may make sense for you to focus more on that test because you're getting some free iterations of it at your school. But I agree with you that if students have the ability to do a sample of each one and then kind of figure out what they like, that also is very, very helpful. And it is true, 100% of the colleges, whether they require the ACT or SAT or it's optional, do not give preferential treatment to one or the other. They are not allowed to do that. They have to accept both of them equally. And I have to drill this into the heads of many parents who were raised in the era of, well, you have to go based off of, no, you don't. Now it does not matter.
Right.
So what about when this is a really common question that parents and students ask me is, what's the timeline for preparing to take the ACT or the SAT? So most juniors end up taking it in the spring of their junior year. So if I know that that's coming up, what should I do as far as the timeline and the preparation for that particular exam?
Yeah, and most students do end up taking it roughly in their junior year, and partially because you need a certain level of math skills as well. If you're in some advanced math classes, you may have covered, the algebra or geometry or even the slight amount of trig that's on there in as early as like 8th or 9th grade. So it's a lot of times for those more advanced math students, they're more refreshing than learning anything new. But for most students, they have to allow the math to catch up, right? And also just from a motivating standpoint, teenagers change immensely, even in 6 months, let alone a year. And the motivating factor can shift a ton from, like, let's say freshman to sophomore to junior year. So I would actually bookend it with when it's too early and when it's too late. Obviously, you're always reined in by the application deadlines as far as being too late. And that's going to roughly be by the end of your fall semester of senior year. Yep. But I typically recommend backing up from that and doing things earlier because you have the applications themselves, you have the essays that you're writing, you have senior year coursework, sports, extracurriculars, all these things. So if you can get it done earlier than the start of your senior year, that's definitely the best, and even more ideally, I would say by the end of your junior year. So as far as when to have them all done, broadly speaking, the earlier, the better, just to get it off your back. But going on to the earlier side of things, you don't necessarily need to get it done anytime like super early. And I remember even with my daughter's swim club, we'd be, hanging out at a swim meet, and in between races, some of her friends or teammates would be doing like practice sets of SAT problems. Mind you, at the time, these students were in like 7th grade. And I was looking at these parents like, you just don't need to do this now. Like, just let them focus on their regular coursework. We'll get there in a few years. But they were in that mindset where it's because the test used to be more rote memorization. It used to be more drill set based like that. So I understand where the motivation comes from, but they can hold off until, I like to say, the earliest you should start is, let's say, the spring of your sophomore year. If the student's motivated, if their math, if they're pretty much done with or most of the way through Algebra 2, like that kind of Algebra 2 early trigonometry range, pre-calculus, you're already set. You're ready if you're in a pre-calculus course. But what I like to say is just get a practice test in. Just set a baseline score so we know what we're working with. Because let's say for the SAT, if you want to go from, let's say, a 1250 to a 1400, okay, that's a certain approach, and there's certain things we can do to get there. If you're looking for a 1000 to a 1500, well, that's much more considerable, right? It's good just by the nature of it. If you're trying to, run a certain like mile time or something, if you're starting off at a 15-minute mile, it's different than starting off at an 8-minute mile. Same difference. And so I like to use kind of the 4th of July holiday as a marker, really for both years. As you end your sophomore year and head into your junior year, so that rising junior summer, if by the 4th of July holiday you have a practice test in place, you have a baseline, that allows us to plan around the rest of summer leading into junior year, all of junior year, and even the summer leading into senior year. And you have at least 15 months to deal with. It should never take longer. Test prep for either the SAT or ACT should never take longer than 15 months. And even that is likely almost 3 times as much as it ever should take.
Right.
And
I
so
was
then,
I was going to
go
say
ahead,
15 months is a long time. I don't want people to feel like you need 15 months. Even if you have a couple of months before the test, and you can, like, any test prep is better than no test prep. So even a few months will help out. But yeah, 15 months would be great, so you can space it out a little bit farther. I think they're worried about, like, okay, 15 months and I'm going to do 2 to 3 hours every week. Like, give them a sense as to, if they're starting 15 months out, what's the time intensity of that?
Yeah, and I think the 15-month marker, kind of think of that end of sophomore year all the way until the beginning of senior year. It's more that it gives us flexibility to plan correctly, because students are going to have different commitments, whether it's like theater or sports or student government, you name it. And, you don't want to tack on test prep during the height of, let's say, your football playoffs, right? Or your like debate team finals, right? Or during AP season, even necessarily. So for me, it's more, okay, when do you have the most time available, and when can we fit this in without disrupting anything else that's going on in your life? And so for some students, that's summertime. Some students are playing like travel soccer all summer, so it's better in the fall, or maybe it's better to start over winter break and head into the spring. But the more time we have to work with, the better. But to your point, for any one official test, it's usually closer to about 6 to 12 weeks that we like to prep students. And at least 6 gives us at least meeting once or twice a week. We can cover a decent amount of material, make an impact. But, once you get up to about 12 weeks, it's almost like sometimes you just got to run the race, right? Like you don't want to just drag it on. But one thing I want to mention that is kind of worst case scenario to avoid is when you don't have a proper plan in place and you're just kind of winging it. Because even our programs, they might meet at most once or twice a week. And it's because less than once a week really isn't consistent enough. And more than twice a week, I mean, we can, but it's almost like, why? Is there a deadline we're up against? And with proper planning, there won't be. So you don't want to burn a student out either, right? So once or twice a week, depending on their schedule, is generally the sweet spot. And the worst case scenario, though, is a student signs up for once a week. Let's say they're about 12 weeks out. They're going to put in 18 hours of tutoring there, meeting for an hour and a half once a week, plus the homework and so on. And then a vacation happens, and then they get sick for 1 week, and then they have, like a sports final or something, or playoffs that they're doing. And then all of a sudden, things keep getting pushed back, and now you have to push back the test date as well because they're not prepared. And in their head, they're like, oh man, I've been dealing with this test prep for 6 months. And it's like, well, not really. You've had it on your mind for 6 months, but you've only put in the same amount of work that we could have done in 4 weeks. Right. So that sort of dragging it out sort of thing is just truly the worst case scenario, because you lose motivation.
Well, and it's very similar to if an athlete is preparing for a competition, or if a performer is preparing for a show. You need a longer runway in case you need to take, a step away from it, whether it's due to illness or work or something like that. So if you have a longer runway, it's easier to do. But yeah, it's going to feel like, man, I've been doing test prep for forever. Well, no, you took some time off, you did some things, you had, other stuff come up. But having some type of preparation is better than none. I get nervous for the students, and I hate to call them out, but it's usually my teenage boys who are going to be like, yeah, I'll just cram through it 2 weeks before. And I'm going, if you're going to do a sports competition or prepare for, a theater performance, you wouldn't try and cram that in 2 weeks before, because that's not going to go well. And for some reason with test taking, no matter what the test it is, we don't think about this long term. We think about it like, oh man, last minute, I got to just cram this all in and try and get it done. And I'm going, that doesn't work. It might work for your one, pre-calc test or your one US history test, but this is a very different animal.
Yeah, I agree. And one other thing I'd like to add to that is it's okay to pause test prep at times. And what I mean by that is, I think parents and students get overwhelmed and start to dread the process of doing test prep because they think, oh, I'm going to have to do this. There's not a set end date for them, right? I'm going to have to do this endlessly for 4 months or 6 months. It's almost like assigning a paper on something, but I don't give you a page limit, right? It just feels
Yeah.
too open-ended. It's almost paralyzing. And so that's why it's like, hey, let's focus on one test date. We're going to focus on where you're at with your schedule. We're going to lead right up to that test date, kind of like we're training you for a competition or a triathlon or something like that. We're going to wait to get the results back, and then we'll reassess. And it might be that we need to pause for another 3 months or so. Like we have a lot of students right now that are finishing up their summer prep for the August and September test dates, and then they're going to be in sports for the fall. And if they need to take it again, we're pausing all the way until probably next January. And it's because test prep, it's not like working out where if you stop, you'll lose strength. Generally speaking, you retain most of it. It might take a session or two to refresh at most, but it's because these tests are more about form and like your overall approach. So that's the way I like to compare it is, it's not like weightlifting or running where you'll lose that strength or that speed. It's a lot more like golf or tennis, and you really retain that form and that approach, even if you do take a break, but that allows them to release from this dread of, oh, this is just going to drag on and on. I'm so over it. Instead, it's, hey, let's do this one plan, see where we get to, then reassess, and then we'll plan from there. And then if you need to repeat that, you repeat it. But ideally, they get their score and they're on their way.
I love all of that, and I appreciate you sharing that. I would also add that the ACT and SAT are not IQ tests. This is not
Correct.
an assessment of a person's intelligence. So I don't want students to feel like, oh, if I don't get a top score, I'm not smart, because these are really games. These are logical games, bubble games, that you're trying to figure out that way. It has no connection to your IQ and no connection to success in life. As you've said, a lot of colleges and universities have now played into these, so we have to learn how to play these games if you're going to be interested in certain colleges and universities. And again, the colleges themselves, the vast majority of them say that the test scores are much lower on what they look like or what they look at for priorities versus a really great high school curriculum, great classes, great, selection of courses over the course of 4 years. That's way more important than 3 to 4 hours on a bubble test. So I know these play a role for some colleges and universities, but I want to de-stress some families that are just like, oh my gosh, if I don't get a great test score, I can't go to a great college. I'm like, that's not true at all. There's a lot of options.
Yeah, and on that same note, of course there's certain content, right? There's certain reading skills and like data analysis with the science portions and of course the math content. But exactly like you said, they're set up in certain ways where I like to even tell parents, okay, try to take a test where there are factually true answers, but they're incorrect because they don't answer the question specifically enough. And there's a better answer, right? Like how frustrating, especially when in high school, that's the way you've been tested is who did what, where, when, why. And you kind of match those, people or those characters to the events. But here, it's not just that. It's, well, how did that person feel at that moment, right? And you're looking for those key indicators on tone and kind of the nuance there. And also with this, one thing that you can, to the point about it not being an IQ test, is most students know and understand most of the content, right? There are some that have more difficulty than others in reading comprehension or with math or what have you. But the way you can see this as a tutor is when someone truly doesn't understand something and they're learning something new for the first time, it's a much like slower growth. And you can kind of see it kind of, they're slowly getting it. They'll kind of have responses of like, okay, like they're a little bit unsure, they're a little wary, right? But when it's something that they just weren't like observing, like they didn't see exactly what it was, but they understood it, they just couldn't access it because of the way it's set up and the structure, it's like a light bulb going off. And their reaction's like, oh, are you kidding me? Like it was right there the whole time. How did I not see that? Right. And that's usually what more test prep is and where we can get the really quick gains rather than like kind of exposing them to the structure and the format of the test rather than having to like learn those things from the outset or learn the content from the outset.
I think that's great advice. I think another thing that I hear a lot is that these tests are trying to trick me. And so they're trying to make me fail. And I tell students often, no, they're wanting you to get the right answers. You're overthinking some of these things and thinking like one of the answers is only right 0.6 times whatever, some tiny amount of thing.
Hmm.
And it's like, no, the answer that's right 99% of the time. And you're like, well, yeah, but that's way too easy. I'm like, it can be easy. Some
Right.
of these questions are really easy. You're just stressed out and worried and you're overthinking. And you're like, well, this other answer could be right 0.04% of the time. And I'm going to take that one. I'm like, no, it was the other obvious one. There's so much that students stress out about these things, and I really am appreciative of people like you, Eric, that are out there trying to help students and parents understand these college game assessment things. They're not really assessments; they're more of just a test, uh, and really helping them navigate that. Are there other best or worst case scenarios for test prep? Are there things that you would recommend as students and parents are thinking about test prep?
Yeah, I think going back to the worst case, it's really a lack of planning, like just kind of winging it or letting the plan kind of fall by the wayside, like not sticking
Oh
to it.
yeah, yeah.
Um, and on, other than that, no real major worst case scenarios come to mind. I mean, I've had students like break their wrists snowboarding the week before the test. Don't do that. Like get a really bad sunburn because they went to the beach the day before. Don't do that, of course, but those are pretty avoidable things. On the best case scenario, I think that it's just buy-in. It's buy-in from the parents,
Mhm.
it's buy-in from the student, it's clear expectations, especially around homework, because a key component of test prep is that you can't just go through the motions. Like you can't just quote unquote do the homework and then just go on with your day. You really have to try to figure out, okay, how is this problem being set up? What sort of key
Yep.
indicators are there here? What can I eliminate from the answer choices? Like, so it's really giving yourself over to the process and buying in, rather than just, I guess in a certain way, just paying for tutoring isn't going to increase your score, and just filling out bubble sheets isn't going to increase your score. You actually, going back to the basketball analogy, like you actually have to run the drills, put up the shots, do the dribbles, like run the plays.
I Can you say that louder for the people in the back? Because
Yeah.
I really feel like so many parents are just going, okay, who's the best test prep company? Who can I pay? And that's just going to solve my kid's test prep problems. And this kid's magically going to get a perfect 1600 or a perfect 36, depending on what score, what exam they're taking. And I'm just going, that's not how test prep works. It's not like, okay, I just was having a conversation with a family online who paid a very large amount of dollars. We're talking over $10,000 for a test
Hmm.
prep person. And the mom was complaining because the student's test scores did not change at all from where the kid was hiring the tutor and then taking the test again. And I kind of said, well, did the kid do anything between point A and point B? Like, did they
Right.
practice? Did they follow the recommendations of the tutor? Did they do the drills, as you said? And the mom never replied, which probably speaks to the answer. But, you know, how do students and parents figure out what type of test prep they should be going for? Obviously, you offer one version of test prep, but there's lots of different things and tools, some free, some cost money. How do students and parents figure out what is the best test prep for them?
Great question. And, there are thousands of providers, whether it's an AI firm that just popped up that has some claim to fame about their new algorithm, a boutique firm like mine that specializes in one-on-one tutoring. You have the big group course, like corporate models of like Kaplan and Princeton Review and places like that. So really, I again kind of compare it to restaurants, right? You kind of have like the Michelin star down the street, been there for decades, and that's what I'd at least like to think of Rath Tutoring as. But then sometimes you want McDonald's, and that's down the street and it's everywhere, and everything in between. And so as far as like just good practices on like how to vet tutoring companies, all tutoring companies generally fall within about the same price range, like give or take. It sometimes it'll vary a little bit regionally. Of course, you can always hire like a high school friend or like a college student for probably half. But I'd say more so it's on how comfortable you are with their processes and with the people you'll be working with. And so more so with us, our families work with our directors of tutoring to set up the program. They're essentially taking into account their whole schedule, all of their other courses and commitments, their baseline score, their goal score, all of these things. And we're creating a custom tutoring plan that fits their life, right? And that's going to be essentially your liaison. So if you're not comfortable with that person, why would you ever hire us, right?
Right.
But then secondarily, you have who the student's going to be working with, and that's the tutor themselves. And we have, even within our company, a lot of different personalities in tutors. Some are more hard driving and a little more dry.
Mm-hmm.
Some are a little kind of more chill, like almost like an older sibling and stuff, like, oh, we'll get to it and stuff, just a little more personable in that way. And so a lot of times, actually, as part of our intake process with families, we ask, like, what sort of teachers have really resonated with your kid before? You know, what teaching styles have really worked? Are there any things we should avoid? Right? Like they actually don't do well with someone that's a little more collegial and a little more fun in that way. And that's actually like less motivating for them. So there's taking that into account. But I think also seeing if they'll let you meet the tutor, seeing if it's a good fit. And if not that, because we offer a complimentary trial session, like a meet and greet, just to kind of feel it. You're not going to get into a ton of content. It's only an hour at most, but
Right.
it's because once they see how it works and they meet the tutor, they know who they're going to be working with. Like that's essentially our best sales pitch is just try us, you know, almost like giving out a free sample of like our best dish at the restaurant, right?
Ooh.
And if they don't let you meet with the tutor, because a lot of them won't, because it does cost money. We're paying the tutor to show up and you haven't necessarily signed up yet. Is what happens if they don't like the tutor? Can they change them? Like what sort of policies are there? And I'd also very much beware of any guarantee, because even the best students, because I still tutor, you know, it's a lot fewer students per year because I'm running the company and doing other stuff, but you know, I still always actively have at least one or two students I'm working with. And because even students that I work with that end up with amazing scores, they'll have a bad test day. Like you can have a bad performance. It's a singular day, it's a singular performance. You might have just gotten frustrated on one problem and then it threw you off for 4 or 5 different problems after that. And so I never really get worked up about any one result, even one practice test, one homework result, one official test, because again, that's just indicative of one performance. But what does that overarching sort of result look like? What is it trending towards? And what's the why more so? Because I like to say as well that not all wrong answers are created equally, because my criticism of like a Khan Academy is that while it's very useful and helpful, it's not necessarily picking out exactly why you missed the problem. And this is even like a very in-depth program that like staggers like, well, did you do this? And it asks you questions on follow-up and stuff. And even then, you know, it might have been that a student understood everything. They just didn't carry a negative sign, right? Something so simple, or they didn't distribute a coefficient. It might have been that they didn't understand it at all. And those are completely different pathways to solve it. And so what we really try to focus on is reviewing homework and tests with students to pick out what sort of trends are coming up over and over, right? Because if we can plug in one thing or one approach, one piece of content that's going to cover 10 or 15 problems, it's the most efficient way to raise your score.
Yeah.
But I think just making sure that you trust in their ability, the personal connection more so, because that's who you're going to be working with. And, you know, I still even get tutored these days. You know, I speak Spanish and Portuguese, and to keep those up, I usually have tutoring once a week in both of those. And I would not do it if I didn't like my tutor, right? And that's me at 42 years old, working in the tutoring industry. I'd put
Right.
myself up to the same standards.
I think you gave a lot of great advice. One, a couple things I'd like to reiterate. I'm very nervous about places that give guarantees. Same thing in my industry, in the independent educational consultant industry. I will never guarantee admission to certain colleges and universities. I might say, yep,
Right.
you are guaranteed a slam dunk into XYZ institution. I can say statistically it shows that you have a very good shot, but I can never put a guarantee sticker on it and say that's going to happen. And I'm nervous about that. Price also, the more expensive does not mean better.
Right.
It might mean a different style of quality and a different style of experience, but it does not always mean better. I love that you said can you meet with a tutor? I always do consultations free with students and families so they can get to know me, because I'm going to be meeting with them and their kid on a fairly regular basis, and I
Yeah.
want to get to know them. And if I'm not doing that, that's not going to work. But I love that you also reminded, if you can't meet with the tutor, because yes, that can cost money, is there a way to switch if it's not a good fit, if it's not a good match? Can you get a refund if it totally, crashes and burns? But I also want parents and students to be aware that ACT, SAT tutors are going to give homework. And my
Yeah.
students who have done really well with test prep are the ones who went through and did the homework and followed
Mhm.
through with the drills and the exercises and whatever it is. Sometimes it's online, sometimes it's paper and pencil, but it's the same way with sports and with music. If you don't practice, nothing's going to happen. It's not the one little 90-minute tutoring session that's going to change everything. It's really the consistency and practicing over time that I think is really, really important. So also, I like your restaurant thing, because there are restaurants that I absolutely hate that my friends absolutely love. And
Mhm.
I think we see a lot of that online, is that parents will say, "Oh, I worked with this test company. It was absolutely amazing and it worked for us." And it may not be the right fit for your kid. So you need
Right.
to vet everyone. Just because a test prep company has amazing Google reviews does not mean that it is the perfect test prep company for you. Um,
Right.
I like that for your tutoring service that you do allow interactions with tutors, that you do allow to have good communication, that you are trying to come up with an individualized plan for every student and family. There are some pluses to that, because not every test prep place offers those types of services.
Absolutely. And well, and really where I get informed on that is being a parent myself, right? Like, would I sign my own child up for a service when I don't even know who they're going to be working with and it's sight unseen?
Right.
And all of our tutoring is over Zoom as well. So it's like, oh, you want me to pay X amount of dollars for some floating head on a computer screen? Like, who is this guy? Or who are these people at first, right? And also going back to the guarantee aspect, um, it's a marketing ploy,
Yep.
right? And the reason being is that most of them, when you read the fine print, they'll just allow you to like use their software longer or and not actually get more tutoring, or you can take the same class again if it's a group course, but it's not actually ever like a true money back guarantee or like the things that they claim. And then with the students doing the work or doing putting in the work point, this is where test prep and the process really differs from like regular high school, because I think students are used to just taking tests where it's like, did you get it right or wrong? And then
Yep.
there's not really follow up, and they're not getting that personalized attention. And instead, we want you to come up against that wall. We want you
Mhm.
to reach that point of like, I don't know where to turn, because that's data for us. And we can help shape your approach and say, okay, but did you see this? And then all of a sudden the rest of it opens up. But if we don't have that data point of what friction point that you're running into, we can't address it, right? So that's where you can't just go through the motions. You really do have to do it. And one good tip I give, and this is for any student working either self-study or with a tutoring company in a class, if you run into issues while you're doing your homework or your practice tests, write down that issue right then, like immediately. And it's because you're never going to remember, even a day later, the 10 or 15 things that you ran into. But in the moment, you're like, I think it's this, but I'm leaning towards this other thing because of this part. Okay, great. That's more information for a tutor. And any
Mhm.
true tutor should not just be lecturing. They shouldn't just be droning on and on. They should be engaging. Like when I sit down with students, they're almost shocked because I'm like, okay, well, what did you do? And they're like, wait, you're the teacher. You're supposed to be like tutoring me on this. You tell me. And I'm like, no, I need to know how you approach this to begin with. And then you might actually be on the right track. You just missed something small. You might be way off and we need to do a course correction, but talk me through it. And it's also allowing the student a space to say, well, this is the issue that I'm running into because it's naturally going to arise.
That's why I remind parents that both in your industry and in mine, we act as coaches. We are not
Right.
doing the stuff for them. We are coaching them through the process. So I do the same thing. I ask my students, "So, what did you work on this last week?"
Yeah.
And it's not the, "So, here's what I'm going to do with you." I need to know what you've done So then I can figure out, okay, what did you miss? What do we need to work on? What do we need to correct or
Yeah.
review? But if you be like, if a student says, well, I didn't work on anything, I'm like, well, I can't magically
Right.
change that. Like,
Yeah.
if you don't put any effort in, I can't help you with stuff. You've got to put some effort into it as well.
Yeah. And one quick one that I used, and I encourage our tutors to use as well at Rath Tutoring is just sit down with the student and say, so what do you feel good about? What are you worried about? Because they're gonna tell you. Like they're stressed, whatever's, bubbling to the top of their mind, it's gonna come out. Right. And just giving them that place to help shape the session so that you're not wasting time on things they already feel comfortable with. And instead, you're focusing on the things that will efficiently increase their score.
I I want to reinstate what you just said. What do you feel good about and what are you worried about? I think those are
That's it.
great questions for parents, counselors, anyone working with teenagers to help them to talk. It's like, what do you feel good about and what are you worried about? Because hopefully that will open up some conversation that way. I do want to
Yeah.
dive into one more quick topic because we get asked this a lot. The
Hmm.
ACT has made a lot of changes.
Right.
And so, what are you recommending for families about the ACT science? This is a hot topic this year. Is what the heck do we do with ACT science? And also, ACT writing comes up a bit as well. But I really would like to hear what are your thoughts on ACT science and ACT writing?
Skip them unless they're required. That's the short answer. And partially why put in more work if you don't have to. Um, and I think this is an important part of this is that, the SAT and ACT constantly go back and forth with the different changes, and they're always kind of, I mean, they're companies and they're competing for market share.
Yep.
Um, and so with the ACT science, when the SAT did their latest revision, they included data analysis in the fact that they like embedded it their in their like reading and math sections, for example. And so you're not completely getting away from science by taking the SAT. It's just that they work it into the other sections, whereas it's a standalone section on the ACT.
Right.
And then, uh, for the ACT science, I think a lot of students are turned off by it, but it is optional now, is at least from the core ACT that's compared to your like full SAT score. You don't need the science anymore, like just for your composite score. And also, it doesn't really test like actual science knowledge. It
Nope.
tests the analysis of like tables and data and trends.
Right.
So I think students are thinking, oh, I didn't take physics. Well, you don't need to. I mean, actually, truth be told, before the pandemic, I would still take the ACT about once a year. So I haven't taken it officially for years. And I think partially this had to do with the Varsity Blues scandal and,
Right.
all that. But I used to take it once a year and now they won't let me anymore. They say it's a security thing because they know I'm a tutor and like they don't release the tests anyways. So whatever. But the last time I took it, I had a clean ace of the science section. And um, the thing is, I'm a cultural anthropology major in college and I haven't taken a science class in 15 years, So it's not testing your like knowledge of parts of the cell is what I'm
Right.
saying.
No, it's teaching you how to read scientific literature, data, and stuff, and being able to find the information within what they give you. It's not you don't have to have any science within your brain whatsoever.
Oh,
Um,
wow.
I will give my counseling advice and say check with the colleges and universities you are planning to apply to see if they require the ACT science or not. I will say that
Yeah.
this is a very big moving target. Some colleges and universities haven't decided yet if they are going to be looking at them or not. So I have been encouraging families take the ACT science at least once so you have an ACT science score just in case a college requires that you have one. But many of the colleges are starting to step away from the ACT science score, but here in the Midwest, a lot of the colleges are still very old school and they want to see all four parts of the ACT. So English, reading, math, and science. So I'm still encouraging families take it unless you have verified in writing, like email, that your colleges no longer require the ACT science. Then I can say you can skip it.
Yeah, I fully agree with that as well. To cover all your bases, include the science. If you've confirmed that you don't need it, feel free to skip it. One thing though as well, even though I'm only on the tutoring side, you know, I don't work in admissions at all, is I have seen certain departments do require, like within universities, require the
Yeah.
science. So you may read like the headline that that school, that university doesn't require the science in general, but then you try to apply to engineering, for example, and they do want it. So you got to do your homework in that sense. It
Yeah.
varies program by program.
Common ones are engineering, nursing, education. A lot of those are still wanting a full ACT score. So again, I think a lot of students go, oh yeah, I don't have to take a section. I'm going, you need to cross your T's and dot your
Right.
I's before you wholeheartedly don't take it. Cause I'm just worried that it's going to bite you later if you don't take it.
Right. And with the writing section, you would know better than me, being that I'm not on the admission side, but
Skip it.
it's you don't need it at all, right?
Skip
Okay,
it.
good. Yeah, because we almost never tutor it. No one ever requires it.
The last time I checked, there were less than 10 colleges that absolutely required it, and even those gave an alternative. And I will tell you that those colleges that required it are not common popular colleges. They were very regional, very specific, and they say in their admissions talk, like, we require the ACT writing, make sure that you take it. They're
Right.
very open about it. And as I said, out of the nearly 4,000 institutions, it was less than 10 that were
Yeah.
on it, and none of them are in the most popular colleges in the United States. So skip it. You don't
Yeah.
need writing. In my opinion, it's another way for ACT to make more money. And I'm like, okay,
Yeah, and
no.
I mean, I guess just to be nice to the ACT for a minute, even though I have my criticisms. I was speaking with a couple of their reps at a NACAC conference years ago, and my frustration was that the high end of the scoring scale was the curve is so difficult. Like
Yep.
you can miss one on the science section, it can drop you 2 full points. It's frustrating because you could just bubble something in wrong and it drops you that much. And so that's what I was originally talking to them about, or with them about. And but what their take was, and for example, with the writing portion, is that their focus isn't really building tests for those like perfect score students or those highest score students. It's really for end of year assessment, like being like the high school exit exam for the state or that grade by grade assessment for the state. And that's where the writing comes from. So it's almost like an appendix, if you will, like, you know, that sort of byproduct sort of organ that you could cut off, but it still remains from like years past. So yeah, skip the writing if, at all costs.
Well, Eric, as we wrap up our time here, I did want to give you a moment to, share some big words of wisdom with our listeners. We've got lots of parents and lots of high school counselors and independent educational consultants like myself. What are some words of wisdom that you would like to share with all of our listeners?
Yeah, I think in my experience in test prep, probably the thing I dislike the most is how much fear and anxiety based marketing is out there. And of course, everyone wants to be validated by the brand name university of their choice or what's going to make them feel great in that sense. But even as an employer myself, I'm much more concerned with what someone's done after they graduated than where they went. And so, yes, of course, in the branded world of America we live today, where you go does matter to an extent, and there's the networking and all of these things. But focusing on anyone that's making wild promises or buying into the fear-based marketing, I like to call them even like parking lot rumors or, kind of like the PTA rumor mill. People love to make claims and people love to share like, oh, I've got the insider information. That doesn't always mean it's actual true information. And so, I'd say definitely vet multiple companies. We never have a problem with being put up against other competitors. There's other ones that I think really highly of even. And so for the most part, start early so that you have more time on your side. Don't get scared or kind of pushed into something that you're uncomfortable with or a program that might seem like too much just because it feels like everyone else is doing it. And I think also, hey, you've got both Rath Tutoring and Chuck, or me, Eric here, and Chuck to rely on if you have any other questions. We're not just figureheads. We still respond. We're still around. We're happy to help clarify. and just provide that peace of mind. It's a process.
Those are great words of wisdom. Eric Rath from Rath Tutoring. You can find him at rathtutoring.com. We'll have contact information in the show notes today as well. I really appreciate you taking some time and sharing your knowledge about ACT, SAT, test prep, this whole thing with our listeners. This is really, really helpful. I've learned quite a bit, and I really appreciate you being here today.
Perfect. Thanks for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Well, folks, that's all the time we have for today, but fear not, we will be back next week with more tips and tricks to help you conquer the college application process like a boss. Until then, remember, don't chuck it up.
Don't